Welcome back to the Reliably Intermittent Podcast. It's episode I'm frankly not sure because Drew and I have been on hiatus for approximately forever, at least since last year. So first things first, welcome back, Drew. How you doing?
Good to see you, my man.
Yeah, I don't feel like we've seen each other forever in person. We've gotten
Yeah, I feel like we're just they say like two ships passing, right? But it's
yeah,
just like two people alternating different periods of quarantine. Like,
right.
you know.
Yeah. We've got really good at this whole Zoom Teams thing, so that's
Yeah.
helpful. But yeah, the idea just popping down to say, "Hey, Drew, what's up? I got this thing," is uh is dwindling away to a distant fond memory.
Yeah. I mean, I know we're not going to talk about that today, but there's something to be said about inner office interactions
Mhm.
that I'm sorry, there's just no making up for it in the virtual world. I mean,
There's a definite and distinct value to it. There's a definite and distinct value to this whole remote concept too, right? Hopefully, one of these days we'll be able to find some kind of happy medium.
oh, I feel like we're already at the point where I know what my walking to school, uphill both ways analogy is going to be for my kids. Gonna be, I remember when we had to go into the office,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I remember when I had to get up out of my seat, walk 10 feet to my neighbor to see what they were eating for lunch. And you old people, now you just text, you know?
Yeah. Teams wasn't even a thing when I came up in the world,
Yeah, exactly.
or whatever the next iteration of this when we get into hologram technology with the Xenials or whatever,
Yeah.
I remember when the only hologram that I saw was Tupac.
Yeah.
Who's Tupac? Oh, well, we need to get anyway. Um, so I guess we can get into what we plan to talk about today, which was a topic of yours that you thought would be a great foray back into the podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I think the timing is good. It's been ongoing, but really it's about mask wearing, uh, and the impact on the workplace, right? Not should you wear a mask or shouldn't you wear a mask? That's not getting into that, the politics of it or usefulness of it. That's not the purpose of it. But I think with the January 20th coming and going, right, and the new administration taking office, uh, you are seeing a more unified message, at least, of a national mask mandate for interstate travel. What that means, I don't know, but we all have been living with you go into a business, you wear a mask. You should be wearing a mask in the workplace to help prevent the spread of it. And I think hopefully, right? I guess hopefully the country masks can stop being political. And it doesn't matter what you believe. Let's just hopefully do something. And if it is helping, awesome. If it's not
Well,
helping, I wore a mask for a little bit and what's the big deal?
yeah, hopefully the mask discussion gets back to being a general application of the 5% rule that we deal with as HR pros, right? You write rules, you write laws, you write whatever to deal with the 5% of people that ruin it for everybody else.
Yep, 5% of my employees cause 95% of my problems.
Yeah, hopefully we get back to more of that being this kind of situation. Um, who knows? Um, we all have lived in the country the last month, so who knows, right? And I'm not even getting into any of that so much as just to say my general faith in that maybe it may not be a 5% rule, but if we can whittle it down to maybe 10-12%, that we can get back to that semi-daily office interaction with more regularity.
Yeah. And so I think like what you're seeing or what I think what some employees are seeing, what some employers are seeing, certainly probably in the service industry, um, are uh, masks being used as a form of harassment. So I was reading a blog I want to give credit where credit's due, to a blog written by an attorney who writes a great blog, John Hyman, and I think he was reiterating something he read. So it's probably like giving credit to someone who's giving credit. But there's a giant report written by the restaurant workers or service workers industry about, and I don't know if he termed it or if this report termed it, but called it masculine harassment. And I hadn't even thought about it. I truly hadn't. And there's this whole other realm going on. Yeah,
That's wonderful branding, if nothing else. But
perfect.
I
Yeah, I
digress. Go
mean,
ahead.
I caught it. When I saw that like hyperlink, it was clickbait for an HR person, right?
Yeah, for nerds like us, that is definitionally clickbait.
But it also triggered something that just made complete sense, right?
Mm.
Like it was like, oh, this could be like workplace harassment, bullying, right? It's not necessarily sexual harassment, but it's people that are being treated in a inappropriate manner.
I was going to say maybe you could give an idea on what they're terming it as, because I think depending on the viewpoint of a given listener or individual, that masculine harassment could be considered a both sideser kind of
Mhm.
thing. So what are you
Absolutely.
seeing?
Yeah. So their viewpoint in this study was definitely under the sexual harassment standpoint, but I think let's extrapolate. So, but some great examples, right? Very distasteful, some dark humor, right? Some of them when you're in this world, you got to laugh at some of these things, regardless if they're distasteful or not. So, we some just a small snippet of the surveys of people that were talking about things that they had heard since they started wearing masks that they've been subject to was, I wish I could see your pretty lips if they match your pretty eyes. Come on, sweetie, let me see that pretty face under there. Take it off for me, will you? Just a quick flash, right? Like they're like a play on words, like a double
Yeah.
entendre. Like everyone knows, I shouldn't say everyone. Typically, when you're talking about someone flash someone, they're usually talking about flashing, generalized, your sex organs and things like that, or
Yeah, yeah, things that in general polite society that are covered up
correct.
for better or worse.
Yeah.
Again, just the
Well,
general things that aren't, you don't say, "Hey, flash me your face," because our faces are generally out for consumption. I guess
exactly.
for
So
lack of a better way of
one of those
putting
good old play on words that sexual harassment gets in a lot of trouble, right? Where the intent of the word matters. We had I don't wear a condom. I sure as hell aren't going to wear a mask, right?
I just want it
Social.
said for the people that are listening on podcast feeds, there is a high degree of cringe going on right now,
Yep.
not advocacy.
Yes.
But go ahead.
This was it. I don't social distancing, right? My pocket rocket can still reach you,
Jesus
right?
Christ.
So these are all things. Now, working in the service industry back in my college days, being a bartender and busboy and everything in between in the restaurant, like I feel like it is an industry that is ripe with sexual harassment from customers to and generally speaking to waitresses. You don't see it a lot of
Sure.
the waiters.
The frontline service professional.
Yeah. So they were focusing on this, and I was like, appalled and like, this is real. And then I'm thinking, this is probably going on for all of our industries, right? For it may not be as prevalent, but customer service or front facing workers, receptionists, people taking bills, clerks,
Sure.
tech people going on site to people's houses that are wearing masks and you dealing with customers. And then you've got what you talked about, which is mask wearing in the workplace, where it's just bullying. And it can be both sides. Like, oh, you you liberal idiot, believe in the masses, COVID with your vaccine. And then the mask people, let's say there's 90% of the people wearing masks and there's one guy who's not. And they're like, you idiot, conservative, QAnon support. You know what I mean? Like it can be the both sides.
Yeah. Well, man, we are kind of hired guns, right? And we go in, and these are the people that have asked us to be there because they trust our perspective, want our perspective, whatever. I've been bad at like a sheep earlier on in this process than more recently for wearing my mask in a situation where there were a ton of people in the room, right? I mean, and that's us. And I'm not saying I'm putting us up on a pedestal, but generally our interactions are more like one of kind of credibility, or I don't want to say respect, but just kind of the perspective is
Yeah.
different for us, that we're there to do this thing. And I got bad at. I can't
Mhm.
imagine what somebody that doesn't have that intrinsic level of worth, credibility, whatever, is getting, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, whether it's harassment on the terms of you're getting picked on because you're adhering to these benefits, or if you're not adhering to the rules and it's your political belief that this is some sort of fake thing, right? That's one of those things where the work rules trump. Okay, so let's just be clear. You can't bring your political beliefs into it and decide to impose. I don't care if you believe it or not. You got to follow the rule, right?
Mhm.
Now, the people who are following the rule, you don't get to treat someone poorly, though. You don't get to. You can make a complaint through your HR, your supervisor, and go, "Hey, we have a work rule, and I
There's a
feel."
process.
Yes, you don't get to target them and make it uncomfortable. To be clear, being a masker or an anti-masker is not a protected class. So we're not going into any type of thing like that. Now, I will say, I think an employer has a legitimate concern if they have someone who is not wearing a mask and they have a rule that says you have to wear a mask and they're not enforcing it. And then
Mhm.
you have someone who maybe they have an autoimmune disorder, or they are more susceptible, maybe they have high anxiety, they have something that is a triggering Americans with Disability Act disease, right? And all of a sudden, the failure to emphasize the rule is triggering that event. There could be liability out there. I mean, I am diagnosed with high anxiety disorder, right? And your employer's out there. I'm subjected to a hostile work environment because I'm the only one wearing a mask and no one else is.
And oh, by the way, there's a rule saying we're supposed to, but you're not
Yeah,
enforcing it.
and at least like in Ohio, if you're in these settings, you have to wear a mask, and it's a governor order. So you're not enforcing it because you don't believe it. Well, it could bite you in the rear end as an employer. And this is where if it's the rule, you got to follow it, right? Whether you believe it or not. It's
Yeah,
not.
it's an insular application of kind of an age-old HR principle. You have to apply these rules.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And we've seen examples in the media all the way up to the very governors that are applying these orders, not following their own rules, right?
Mhm.
And what happens? It, at a minimum, incredibly decreases the credibility of the individual making the rule.
Mhm.
It sets up you in whatever role it is that you're in for failure. I mean, you're again, it's like any rule. Hey, everybody, the rule is everyone has to do X, and then the boss doesn't do X. This isn't a situation like at home with your kids where you say, do as I say, not as I do. You're
Mhm.
setting yourself up in the business context, in the workforce, in that world for failure on, like you said, the ADA, for disparate treatment situations.
And how do you enforce anything, right?
Just
So
at a minimal practical standpoint, how do
yeah,
you enforce anything at that point?
yeah. How like you want to fire an employee because they didn't follow a rule, right? And they go, well, you don't follow this rule. What rules are what rules do we have to follow? What rules do we not have to follow? Right? That's you can't just pick and choose.
And how
So
how do you operate functionally in that perspective, right? Because then that's the cascading kind of avalanche of employee morale issues.
mhm,
I want to operate. I want to be able to do my job with some kind of certainty as what rules are going to apply to me, what rules are going to apply to everybody, and I can trust that I have some certainty in doing what I do because I know how these things go. You introduce that level of uncertainty. You introduce that level of inapplicability of certain things to certain people, then people don't even have the baseline foundation of confidence that X means X,
mhm.
that I can just show up and do my job because now I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if John Q. Public or Jane Q. Public or employee is going to do something that I did and I got disciplined. Now they're not, and now I just don't have any trust or faith in my workplace anymore.
Yeah.
How do you get your functions done effectively? You're not going to function at the highest level that you can, and make the widgets the best that you can, or serve your customer base the best that you can, because your employees don't even know the basics of how we operate as a business.
Yeah. And then, so to kind of, and then to go further, with the kind of the masculine harassment to bullying to sexual harassment and how they all interplay, right? Masculine harassment doesn't have to be sexual harassment. That also doesn't mean that it is permissible behavior. But at least in Ohio, right? A lot of times people go, well, let's use the server examples. It's a customer. What am I supposed to do about a customer, right? They're not my employee. What can I do? At least in Ohio, I'm guessing that it's very similar, across the United States. The Ohio Administrative Code is very specific that it has a employer obligation to protect against harassment, sexual harassment from non-employee personnel. You have to follow the same stuff. It's in there. It specifically says in the Ohio Administrative Code that an employer may be responsible for the acts of non-employees. And then it says, e.g., customers with respect to sexual harassment. So in these cases of a customer in a server industry, saying, hey, well, let me flash me your face, this and that, implying sexual innuendos, it triggers the employee's obligations, or the employer's obligations, I'm sorry. And hopefully employers know what those obligations are. But good 5-step process, right? Separate your employee, separate the victim from the aggressor. So if that's a waitress or waiter, hey, they report that to you, you don't finish that table. In fact, the manager should probably come up and kick that person out, right? Hey, sorry, we don't want your service here. We don't want your business. Promptly and fully investigate, evaluate the evidence to determine if there's any action necessary, take the remedial steps, and then hopefully use the process to train or retrain employees, if it's an internal employee one. Even if it's a external, maybe train employees on what their complaint procedure is. Like, hey, we're here for you. We're here to support you and to protect you. You're obviously not going to train your customers, but you may want to train your employees on protecting each other.
Well, I mean, the long and short of it is, employees don't have to tolerate that stuff at work.
Yeah.
And it's relatively clearly enunciated in rule and law.
Yeah.
And ignoring it is not an option
100%.
as an employer.
I get this a lot too, which is, the customer is always right. Or this fallback, the fallback of that we just don't have control over them. It's not an excuse, right?
Well, if you're going to take that stance as an employer, just get your checkbook ready.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's how you want to run your business, get your checkbook out. We're not going to sit here and tell you that you're doing it right. We're not going to say that that's the right approach. Just understand, in terms of your risk assessment, is that customer's ability to do that one customer or two customers, more important to your bottom line? I mean, because you gotta play to your audience, whoever it is that you're talking to. Is your customer always being right the way that your business needs to be run, when you know that the potential for what the action that you want to take to support that customer's right to be right is going to put your business at risk?
Yeah. And it's out there. I mean, there's a woman out there on TikTok and on YouTube who's TikTok famous, not for good reasons, and she's actually an Ohio woman. I have seen her videos come up literally hundreds of times with millions of views of who's going in with she doesn't wear a mask, she goes into grocery stores, she goes into Targets and this and that, and just starts berating employees and causing a stink, and quite literally there's hundreds of people in Ohio that have captured this woman on video, that here she is again on another rampage, right? Like, and it's funny, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm watching it and she's losing her mind, and I chuckle. But when I analyze it a little bit deeper, each one of these employers has had like different reactions. because we got people that are making $9 an hour, people are making 10, 11, and you got a 45 and 50-year-old woman who's just yelling. They don't know what to do. They're just a cashier. You're like, they don't know what to do. And an employer, I think you got an obligation, not necessarily to arm, your 18-year-old employees, with the
You got
tool.
to you have to be ready to support them though.
Yeah, you got to get those managers involved. Hey, guys, when you're on the floor restocking, when you're doing this, when you're at a customer's house, this may happen, right? We're here. Call me. I'm
Here's
there.
how we're going to handle it.
And you get your manager to, hopefully with some de-escalation, try to get it in a way that the person just gets kind of escorted out in a safe and non-disruptive manner. Who knows? Some people are in it for a view.
Yeah.
I think this lady now goes around with her cohort, videoing her because they know she's going to get kicked out, and she's probably going to try to implement some sort of lawsuit. She's one of the people that goes around too with the cards that say this bogus agency says I don't have to wear a mask. She completely believes that there's this free air breathing agency, official government logo with an eagle and stuff. It's wild. But I feel for the employees that clearly are not equipped. Some of them they're looking at it and they're like, lady, I don't own Kroger.
Right.
I'm sorry.
You don't see Kroger. My last name is not Kroger.
Yeah, I there's a sign on the door. What do you want me to do? It says masks are required. Give me a break. Just let me do my job. And you can feel the exasperation of these frontline workers. So it's a real deal. I think some people are probably developing legitimate health conditions, legitimate anxiety, legitimate mental health issues. So we got to be prepared on how to treat, mask disparaging remarks, whether they're sexual or non-sexual. I think you can't ignore people that are also don't want to wear a mask, and maybe they voice that opinion, and maybe they are. I'd say best case scenario, someone doesn't want to wear a mask. It's one of your employees, but they are wearing it. And other employees are giving that employee a hard time. Like, oh, you denier, and they're bullying them. They're following the rule, but they're being treated poorly. That's not right. They're not being discriminated against because it's not a protected class, but I would not permit that behavior.
Well, it's still a workplace disruption.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that person's admirable. They're saying, hey, I have a political standpoint. I'm checking it at the door, and I'm putting on my mask, and I'm following my employer's work rule. That's a good employee. That's a good employee, and they shouldn't be made to feel lesser or to be made to feel like they're an idiot because they're doubting some system. This whole kind of past year has given me a whole new appreciation for people with different beliefs, because there's so much information out there. How do you really get mad at someone if they believe that something is ineffectual when they can turn on official news channels on any single channel and get a different view? So how can you judge them?
Well, what it boils down to again is whether you want to judge them or not, I don't care. As long as they're following the rules, just do your job. Yeah. It's like anything else where people want to complain in the workplace about a given rule. This is another rule. Is it heightened? Is the potential consequence different than your typical work rule A, B, or C? Maybe, probably. I'm not a doctor, but what I do know is that it's another work rule that I'm sure if you took a poll of the people that are harassing on either side of this have complained about another different work rule to people. They still follow it. Yep. I don't like how we do this thing, but you still do it. It is another work rule when you boil it down to its essence, right?
Exactly. There's nothing illegal about the work rule, right? So you got to follow it, period.
Move on.
Even if there wasn't mask mandates by the Fed, by your state governors, whatever, if your employer says this is effectively the uniform, here is the work rule. That's what it boils down to. And when you got a work rule, you want to enforce it uniformly, make sure it's defensible. And then people that there's the underlying issue, if you're dealing with harassment, take those 5 steps. take those 5 steps. They're whether it's an in-house employee on employee or a external vendor, customer, client harassing one of your employees, you have the same obligation, right? You got to separate, you got to protect, you got to investigate, right? You got to deal with the evaluation of the evidence, and then you got to remedy it. Those are the real critical steps for an employer to protect themselves from liability.
Ignoring it is not the option. Ignoring it is not an option.
Never. But that kind of, I really thought it was a good point. Whoever did the study, whatever restaurant survey did the study, I'm sure this is happening out there. And in the legal world, all this stuff takes, a year after it happens, then we're going to start seeing the cases, So I wouldn't be surprised if in 6 months we start seeing EEO complaints for sexual harassment, and the fact pattern is revolving around masks.
Sure.
Inappropriate comments about masks.
Sure.
So.
Well, I think that was a fun one to jump back in on.
Absolutely.
As always, if you are an HR professional and have questions about a given thing, because not everybody that is going to listen to this or watch this has servers or bartenders or whatever, that doesn't mean you're not going to run into things like this, because as we frequently see, individuals can be very dumb and do very dumb things. In 2020, in 2021, there's still shockingly a lot of things that we get calls about that you just go, I trained you. I did training. How does this crap keep happening? So this is almost evergreen. It's just a new way of looking at an evergreen issue. So with that said, Drew, as always, thank you for joining me on our foray back into the digital world in 2021. Any parting shots or thoughts?
No, just the standard, right? We appreciate your support. If you got a comment, leave a comment. If you're listening, it's somewhere else. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff.
Yeah, like, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. We have the YouTube channel. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody to like, subscribe. Just mash on that like button on YouTube. And I guess, and then until next time, thank you for joining us, and goodbye.
Later.
We want to thank you again for joining us on the Reliably Intermittent podcast. Now it's time for a bit of a disclaimer. This podcast and all others on this feed are for informational purposes only and not legal advice. No attorney-client relationship is formed by listening to this podcast or any others on the feed. Should you require or want legal advice, we encourage you to reach out to an attorney or statutory legal counsel, as the case may be. Thanks again for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.